My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. Now, this show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's broadcaster Danny Kelly, and also General Secretary of the Free Speech Nation, Toby Young. He's typing now. He's typing Free Speech. Sorry. So I don't know what I'm doing.
Is one of your shows.
Is it? Oh, that's true, actually, as it goes. So I was getting myself carried away. But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. Coming up to 1 minute past 4, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. The family of Archie Battersby say they'll try and appeal against the latest High Court ruling that doctors can lawfully stop providing his life support treatment. It follows a review of evidence at a hearing in London today. The 12-year-old suffered a catastrophic brain injury 3 months ago. Last month, a High Court judge ruled that he was brainstem dead. His parents had successfully challenged the judgment in the Court of Appeal and were fighting for treatment to continue. Speaking to GB News, Archie Battersby's family says they won't give up.
So I can't go no further. That's my little boy. I've had, obviously not a lot of people are sceptical, but I've had healers work with Archie and they're all saying he's there and he's asking for more time. I will honour Archie. He wants more time for whatever reason he wants more time for. Whether it's to pull through or not to pull through, I will get my little boy as much time as he needs. So I'll keep fighting for him.
The remaining 5 candidates in the Conservative leadership race have outlined their plans to tackle the cost of living, the war in Ukraine and the housing crisis. In a warm-up ahead of tonight's first televised debates, Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt, Liz Truss, Tom Tugendhat and Kemi Badenoch all made their case to become leader. Meanwhile, eliminated candidate Attorney General Suella Braverman has given her support to Liz Truss, saying she'll unleash the opportunities of Brexit. However, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the country needs new government, not a new person in number 10.
We don't fear any of the candidates because the change that the United Kingdom needs is not a change at the top of the Conservative Party. We've already had 12 years of failure from the Conservative Party. The change we need, the fresh start we need for Britain, is a change of government.
The Foreign Office has summoned the Russian ambassador to express its deep concern following the death of British aid worker Paul Yuri, who died whilst in captivity in Russian-occupied Donetsk. Mr. Yuri was captured in late April and charged with so-called mercenary activities by separatists in the self-proclaimed republic. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says Russia must bear full responsibility for his death. A man who was part of a gang that broke into former England footballer Ashley Cole's home and threatened to cut off his fingers has been jailed for 30 years. Curtis Dilks was also ordered to serve an extended licence period of 5 years at Nottingham Crown Court. The judge said the former Chelsea and Arsenal defender and his partner suffered psychological impacts that cannot be overstated. Another 2 rail strikes are now scheduled to take place next month. RMT members at Network Rail and 14 train operators say they'll walk out on August 18th and 20th in a dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. It's after RMT and ASLEF members announced that they'll be striking on the 27th and 30th of July as well. The Met Office has issued its first red extreme heat warning for parts of England on Monday and Tuesday. The highest alert means there's a danger to life amid soaring temperatures. It's as the NHS faces a surge in hospital admissions. Tuesday is expected to be the hottest day, with a chance that temperatures could reach a record-breaking 40 degrees. Meteorologist John Hammond says it'll impact everyone and action should be taken.
The impacts will be major. They're not going to last forever. It'll all be over by Wednesday. But for Monday and Tuesday, impacts to infrastructure, transport, health. And I would imagine that many schools will be closed as well, because this country can't cope with 35 degrees. But when we're talking about the potential for 40 degrees, then I think all actions that can be taken should be taken.
Wildfires continue to intensify across parts of Europe as the heatwave enters its 6th day. Tourists enjoying the beach in Torremolinos in southern Spain this afternoon could see huge plumes of smoke billowing from the nearby hills of Mijas. More than 100 firefighters, 4 vehicles and 15 aircraft were working to stabilise the blaze. Spain's Met Office has set an alert for wildfires in almost all of the country due to high temperatures which have passed 40 Celsius in places. And in breaking news, David Venables has been found guilty of murdering his wife in 1982. Brenda Venables' body was found hidden in a septic tank 37 years after she disappeared. The 89-year-old retired pig farmer was found guilty at Worcester Crown Court this afternoon. He's expected to be sentenced next week. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Nana Akua.
Good afternoon. So it is coming up to 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Right, let's talk the D word, diversity. I mean, the BBC are tying themselves in knots with this one. They've employed June Sarpong 3 days a week for around about 267k per year to head up this nonsense. Right, now your best chance of basically getting a job out of the BBC is if you are a black, transgender, gay, disabled, female. They will snap you up. Now, the other day, their reporter pointed out that there were no black women on the women's football team. Have a listen.
Kelly mentioned it was an historic 8-goal victory for England last night as the Lionesses secured their place in the quarter-finals. But all starting 11 players and the 5 substitutes that came onto the pitch were all white. And that does point towards a lack of diversity in the women's game in England. And it's something that Alex Scott has been investigating.
Pot, kettle. There are no black or ethnic faces in their top 10 highest earners. You've got Zoe Ball, Steve Wright, Hugh Edwards and Fiona Bruce. Oh, sorry, I forgot Gary Lineker. He's at the top. Gary will know exactly what I mean. Shame you're not allowed any diversity of thought there, though. So yesterday, I listened to Kemi Badenoch. Now, I'd only really heard her debate the time she made mincemeat of Dawn Butler in the House of Commons when Dawn called her a gatekeeper, which is supposedly a person of colour who does not represent the majority, who is used by white people to pretend everything is OK. I mean, how patronising is that? Listen to this.
Briefed a clear message well in advance of this report landing. Why did the government do that? Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think it is disgusting that a member of this House will stand up and accuse people of being racial gatekeepers. This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again, calling people Uncle Toms, calling people house Negroes and house slaves, and calling them racial gatekeepers. The fact that she is able to stand here and use that phrase without any shame whatsoever just shows how far the Labour Party has fallen.
Impressive. Well, this is what she had to say on LBC yesterday, and I have to admit I was deeply impressed with Kemi.
The challenges that we have today is that I don't know whether it's the cultural establishment or whoever seem to think that there is only one way to be black, and anyone who is not like that is not really black, which of course means nothing to me.
Well, she said that she doesn't see colour, and I'm with her, unless someone is being racist or speaks to me in a way that makes it clear that they've seen my colour by asking me questions like, well, where are you from? In which I always reply, Newcastle. I genuinely don't notice colour either. The most recent incident was somebody warning me of the dangers of the cocoa pox monkey. I mean, it's a monkey. To think that it signifies anything offensive is ridiculous. Ironically, the left-leaning Labour Party, the supposed party of diversity and inclusion, are the least diverse. They've never had a woman leader, and people of colour in their top ranks are virtually non-existent. Now, in the runnings until yesterday, half the Tory leadership hopefuls were from ethnic backgrounds. Speaking of backgrounds, did you spot the Sunak typo? Join my campaign. You can just about see it. Oh, well, you can't see it. There it is. Look, it's spelled I-A-N-G. Well, honestly, seriously. That's almost as bad as Theresa May when the letters started falling off at the Tory party conference. Remember that? So, the question is the UK ready for a non-white Prime Minister? Are you like me, where the colour is irrelevant? Are we ready to, in the words of Martin Luther King, to judge on the content of character rather than the colour of the skin? Right, so before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. In my Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should Kemi Badenoch step down? With the Conservative leadership race well underway, we're now down to the last 5, and the former Brexit Minister David Frost has urged former Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch to pull out of the Tory leadership contest to bolster Liz Truss's position in the race as calls grow for the right of the party to unite around just one candidate. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should Kemi Badenoch step down? In Health Watch today, we'll be looking at the change in climate and what it does to our health. We Brits complain when it rains, we complain when it's hot, we just love complaining. We are never happy, which makes us happy. But with the temperatures hitting record highs across the UK in the next couple of days, we'll be discussing with a doctor how we can look after ourselves properly during this very short heat wave. And then at 5 o'clock on Friday Focus, the leadership race is now down to at least the last 5 contenders. Who is left and what they do and what do they stand for? We'll be taking a dive into their stance on national insurance, tax rises and their policies on the dreaded net zero. And also take a peek at the trans ideology, something that's been plaguing Penny Mordaunt, I was going to say. Mordaunt. That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Welcome again to my panel, broadcaster Danny Kelly and also the General Secretary of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young. Right, so welcome on board, Toby. Thank you very much. It's the first time you've been here.
Yeah.
I only ever see you on the screen, and I remember when you first started Free Speech Union, I was well into that. I was like, this is great, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so now you've seen these the candidates. It's great that they're so diverse in mix. Do you think that this country even noticed? Do you think it's the media slightly pushing it a little bit?
I don't think there's any issue with a woman of colour being the leader of the Conservative Party being an electoral disadvantage. I mean, that is to wildly underestimate the British public. I think, for the most part, the voters don't see colour. They see character. And it's clear, I think, that not just Kemi. I think Liz would be an attractive alternative as well. But her character, her strength of character, her integrity, her honesty, her directness, that all shines through. And the idea that, you know, that Tory voters would be turned off voting for a woman of colour, or even an Asian leader like Rishi, is just insulting. And when Jolyon Maugham tweeted that earlier this week, I was disgusted, and I was glad that he deleted that tweet.
Yeah, it is ridiculous because the thing is, I hadn't really noticed any of that again. It's always other people highlighting it to me to tell me about it and saying, "Oh, you know." And I find it a bit objectionable that people should even they should place that in focus rather than us looking at what these people are saying. What do you think, Dan?
I think there's a reason that people are mentioning so many people of different backgrounds on the shortlist, and that's because, as Conservatives, people are now starting to fight back because for years, generations, the Conservatives have been lazily mischaracterised as racist. So when you have a panel of some of the brightest brains in the United Kingdom, some of whom are black and brown, I understand why people punch back and say, you've got it wrong about the Conservatives. We're not a party of closet racists or overt racists. Going back to the BBC, Nana, the British box-ticking corporation... Toby, you've just met me, but I spent 15 years at the BBC. Right. And they pray at the altar of diversity. When I saw that little monologue from the reporters got formed, by the way, for being ultra-sensitive. She was the one who stormed out of a Scottish FA after-dinner award or something because they had a comic and she took exception to a few of the jokes. And so she started this misogynistic storm, which I think he's been cancelled now. There are 11 first-team players, 5 substitutes, none of them are white. I was thinking, where the hell are you going? Do you not understand that one of the coffin nails that is gradually being tapped deeper into the wood of the BBC, you are contributing to it? Because generally, overwhelming swathes of this country are sick of the BBC having this diversity push. And it's a dogma. It's groupthink, and it's a diversity enrichment for the UK. It's dogmatic, and it swims against the ideology of most of its licence fee payers.
Well, she thought she was holding the moral high ground until somebody pointed out that it's not such a high ground at all.
The really despicable thing about that comment is that imagine when a black player is selected, whether on the substitute bench or in the starting 11, they're now going to think that they've only been selected because of criticism that the team isn't diverse enough. And how's that supposed to make them feel?
Yeah, and also, ironically, let's go now to a black woman who played 125 games for England, and she's going to tell us about the lack of diversity. You know, the presenter herself, Alex Scott, who's a fabulous football pundit, herself is black. So there's a problem with not enough black people. Let's go to a black woman who played 125 games for England. It's contradictory.
Well, and actually, at the end of the day, it's really got nothing to do with the colour of your skin as to whether you're going to be good at the game. And for example, I would have watched that football match. I wouldn't have noticed anything. And it's almost like I am being pre-programmed and forced to see what I don't see. And I think we are very guilty of that constantly. So it's like a perpetuation of a narrative or a stereotype because we want it to go on. And those who perpetuate it are usually the beneficiaries of it. Instead of people like me. I can remember at school when somebody told us the story of the slave trade. I didn't even know about it, really. My parents never mentioned it. In fact, I think it was when I was about 9, somebody said, oh, by the way, you're black. But my parents really weren't into that. They never mentioned it. My dad would say that, sometimes you do a job and there's a glass ceiling. It's made of glass. Break it, just go up, carry on. So that was never in my psyche. But I feel that there is constantly this, and it's weird because it comes from the left wing, usually, that wants to perpetuate a narrative to re-indoctrinate a stereotype that is very negative and actually quite destructive.
Well, the really toxic thing about identity politics is that it racialises everything. It racialises football, it racialises the workplace, it racialises the classroom and the playground. Suddenly, everyone's got to be thinking about what the colour of everybody else's skin is, and suddenly they're becoming aware of race as a factor, when before that they were completely oblivious to it.
Yeah.
The actual story was really interesting, but they didn't have to characterise it about being white or black. The actual story was about grassroots funding and why for young kids in inner cities there's lots of grassroots funding because that's where the best footballers come from. And the women's game and the girls' game hasn't had that money thrown at it. So if I was the editor, I would say, now let's take a little look now as to why working class kids are struggling to get into the England football team. And left it at that. There's no need for the black or white thing.
She didn't need to say that. It's more about culture, actually, less about colour. So you're...
That was the conclusion of the Cred report, which Kemi Badenoch oversaw. They were, Tony Sewell, who led that report, was widely criticised by kind of the woke left for daring to say that he didn't think Britain was systemically racist. He didn't think there was a problem with institutional racism. He didn't say that there's not a problem with racism, but he just said it's not systemic. British society is not riddled with racism from top to bottom. It's more an issue of deprivation and class. Those are the big issues. Those are the real challenges. We need to do something about that, about poverty, about class disadvantage. And to boil everything down to race, it's just unhelpful and toxic.
Well, it's lazy, isn't it? It's just an easy way. It's actually... And the worst bit about it is that it's that person's projecting their perception onto you when maybe you didn't see it that way at all. And I find it interesting as well that a lot of people of colour who do feel that, sometimes people say, oh, it's a chip on your shoulder or whatever, who do feel that society is against them, a lot of those people can't accept that there is another view. And I listening to Kemi, I heard her talking about that, and they won't accept that. They will say, oh, it's people like you, you're a gatekeeper, or you're this, or you're that. You get called some sort of name because you didn't go through that experience, or your experience is different and you see it differently. But some people won't let that go.
To be constantly told by people like Dawn Butler that you're the wrong sort of black person because you're patriotic, because you're a conservative, because you believe in British values, you don't think the empire is a source of shame and nothing else, you don't spend your time criticising Dad's army and it ain't our fault, Mum, like another candidate in this leadership campaign, then you're the wrong kind of black person. It's incredibly patronising.
So we are ready, aren't we, for anybody who's got...
I think so.
Who can do the job, that's what we're after.
Meritocracy, yeah.
Somebody who's competent, for goodness sake. Well, if you just joined me, welcome on board. It's just coming up to 20 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, after the break, it is time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should Kemi Badenoch step down? Now, the former Brexit Minister, David Frost, has urged Kemi to pull out of the Tory leadership contest to bolster Liz Truss's position in this race. But Badenoch's campaign said that she was in it to win it. So what do you think? Send me your thoughts. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell me what you think. You can also tweet at GBNews. And there is a poll up right now asking, should Kemi Badenoch step down? Cast that vote, but first, let's get some weather.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin. A rare Met Office red warning has now been issued for the extreme heat likely on Monday and Tuesday. These temperatures are potentially unprecedented and likely to cause health issue and impacts on infrastructure. High pressure is moving in. Actually, it's gonna bring most of us just a fine summer's weekend, but temperatures will be ticking up more particularly early next week. Temperatures actually drop quite nicely overnight tonight, a reasonable night for sleeping. A few showers across northeastern England, they're fading away. We'll see a bit of drizzly rain in the far northwest by morning, but for most it's a dry night and a clear night, and as I said, reasonably comfortable, single figures in some rural locations. That'll lead into a pleasant summer's day on Saturday for the vast majority. Lots of blue sky. The sun is strong though. UV levels are likely to be high. The main exception will be northern Scotland, where there will be some rain drifting across the Northern Isles and a few showers for the Highlands and the Western Isles. But otherwise, plenty of sunshine, light winds, and temperatures just getting into the low to mid-20s for the vast majority, maybe 27 or 28 across the southeast. However, the temperatures will be ticking up as we go through the next few days. Through Saturday evening, a bit more rain trickling into Northern Ireland, and we'll see showery rain spreading during the evening across parts of Scotland too. For England and Wales, again, a balmy summer's evening on Saturday evening, leading into another sunny and fine day on Sunday. We start with a lot of cloud, though, across Scotland on Sunday. The rain pushing away to the north, so sunny spells developing for central Scotland, southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. Temperatures will be a notch higher on Sunday, likely to be over 30 Celsius in places once more before we go to the next level into the early part of next week. Extreme temperatures are likely as the high pulls away and we drop even hotter air from Spain and Portugal. That is why we have these extreme heat warnings in place, including a red warning. Keep up to date with the forecast and the warnings on the Met Office website.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good afternoon. If you've just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. We are the People's Channel, and it is now time for the Great British Debate. I'm asking, should Kemi Badenoch step down? The former Brexit Minister David Frost has urged Kemi to pull out of the Tory leadership contest so that she can bolster, or her people can bolster, Liz Truss's position. Now, Truss was picking up support from the Tory right after the Attorney General Suella Braverman was eliminated from an increasingly bitter leadership. And writing in the Daily Telegraph, Frost said, Kemi and Suella Braverman set out convincing programmes with differing emphases for change. But Liz's depth of experience, her energy and ideas, as well as the simple fact that she has the most votes of the three, put her in the lead. And it is now time for pragmatism. I urge Kemi to stand down in return for a serious job in a Truss administration. But Badenoch's campaign, however, said that she was in it to win. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should Kemi Badenoch step down? Right, I'm joined now by Lee Anderson, Conservative MP for Ashfield, and is backing Kemi. Now, Lee, it's tactics in a way. I mean, possibly, in your view, who would be the worst person to become the leader? I mean, they're a great bunch, but the worst out of the ones that are left.
Well, they are a great bunch, Nana, and I'm not getting to games, picking the best and the worst. I think Kemi is by far the best candidate. That's why I'm on a campaign team, and that's why I've been campaigning vigorously for Kemi all week. Look, she offers something different, something new. She brings something new to the table. She's not tainted by being in cabinet, and she's got a great backstory, supremely intelligent. She calls out this wokery nonsense. She gets it. She gets that people are struggling. She's not been born with a silver spoon in her mouth. And you know what? When this lady speaks at the dispatch box, the hairs on my neck stand up. She's absolutely superb. And I think people like Lord Frost should give her a break. Let's not try and rig this contest. Let's have a fair crack of the whip. I think Kemi can win this. I think she's got a great future ahead of her. And you know what? I've spoken to her all week, every single day this week, and she's buzzing, we're buzzing. There's a great buzz around her campaign team, and we're on the up because she got more votes again. And I predict, this is my prediction for this weekend, the British public will put Kemi at the top of the polls when they see her in action on the live TV debates.
It'll be something to see, won't it? Because she is excellent. I mean, I didn't know much about her until I started watching a lot of her debates and realised how she just goes straight in for the jugular. And I love to see people who debate in that manner. But let's be honest, the two candidates who are leading the race, so-called leading, so potentially Rishi, because he's got the most votes, and also Penny, they are more left of the right of the party, right? So some of the things that they may want, I mean, for example, Penny did talk about a trans man being a man and a trans woman being a woman, and I don't suppose you agree with that. So would it not be better for for Kemi's supporters? Right.
I think what's got to happen, and I think MPs in our party, and we've got to have an honest conversation with ourselves as to what is best for the party and what is best for the country, and who can unite everybody across the parliamentary party and the country. And I think Kemi offers that. Like I say, she's relatively unknown. She comes with no baggage at all. She's absolutely superb at calling out any nonsense within Parliament or within the country at large. She calls out the left and the mainstream media. She has this honesty about her. Sometimes it's an uncomfortable honesty where she gives direct answers to direct questions. Some people don't like that, but I tell you what, the great British public will love that.
Well, I like that. In fact, she sounds like a woman after my heart. Listen, Lee Anderson, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to talk to you. He's the Conservative MP for Ashfield. He's backing Kemi Badenoch. Right, I'm also joined now by Alberto Costa, Conservative MP for South Leicestershire. He's backing Penny Mordaunt. OK, so, Alberto, come on then. Why Do you think that Kemi should back down so that perhaps some supporters could go elsewhere and maybe it might be easier for Penny to win? What's your view?
Well, firstly, good afternoon, Nana, and forgive me for my voice. I've been speaking to so many MPs that my voice has been partially lost, but thank you for inviting me onto your excellent programme. Look, Nana, for me, it's really quite simple, and I agree with Lee and the comments that he made at the outset about not engaging in blue and blue. We've got a really rich talent panoply of Conservative candidates. But for me, as the longest serving MP on the Committee on Standards, what we need to do as a Conservative and Unionist party is quickly re-establish the trust in the British electorate. And when I looked at all the candidates, I asked myself that question: who can restore good governance? Who can bring about a properly functioning British-style cabinet government? And who can give faith and trust back to the British people with their governing institutions? And poll after poll over the last few days shows that Penny Mordaunt is head and shoulders above all the other candidates to restore trust, not just in England, but in Scotland, Northern Ireland, and in Wales. And look,
Alberto,
the straight choice is this, Nana. I want to see the Conservative Party win the next general election, and I think we can only do that.
Sorry. Can I just stop you there, just very briefly, because Lord Frost said that his direct experience of working with Penny as a notable duty on EU issues in 2001 was that she was quite absent on parade. So this doesn't sound great. And then there's also the comments about the trans issues as well. A trans man is a man and a trans woman is a woman. And she definitely rolled back on that. I mean, I heard it and I heard both comments. And that won't really go down well with anyone.
So Penny and I and all on the campaign team, Penny's campaign team, have nothing but the utmost respect for Lord Frost. And what we're not going to engage in is blue on blue. Penny is a fighter. She fought for Brexit. She did not resign from the government. And she's continuing to fight for the best deal for Northern Ireland and the whole of our United Kingdom in respect of the ongoing issues with the EU. She is the best placed candidate to lead this country, and she's grateful for the support shown from colleagues across the public, private and charity sector, as well as from the military. So for those reasons alone, Nana, I would encourage you to give Penny a good look as well and ask yourself,
I'm looking very closely.
She's the best place to support and trust the British electorate.
Alberto, I'm looking very closely at that. But for somebody with a voice that's going, you managed to get quite a lot in. That's Alberto Costa, MP. Thank you very much. He's an MP for the Conservative Party, South Leicestershire. He's backing Penny Mordaunt. Right, also, I'm joined now by former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire to get her thoughts on this. Scarlett, all right, so the Labour Party, they seem to be demanding as though they really want an election, but they don't. I think they're doing a bit of a Nicola Sturgeon there, saying she wants a referendum when she knows she's going to lose. But what do you think, then? I mean, hold on, Nana. I thought you let me get away with that. We've only got a minute, Scarlett.
I think if we had an election now, Labour would win it.
Really?
And that's what the Labour Party thinks.
Against all of the candidates? Against all of the candidates?
Against any candidate, yes. Yes, I mean, if we had... I mean, I think that whoever wins should put themselves up for election. I mean, so that we know, so that the country knows. Because actually, what's really interesting about these candidates is nobody knows very much about what they're going to do.
Well, nobody knows what they're going to do, but then nobody knows what anyone's going to do. You don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what you're going to do, Scarlett.
Yeah. Okay. So Nana, as you wanted to talk to me about Kemi Badenoch,
yes,
I looked her. I mean, I've been looking up at what she said, and actually, she's a bit of a muddle, right? So on the one hand, she's the sort of person you like. She's weaponizing war on woke, though I would say that she doesn't actually understand that the critical race theory is actually very complex rather than easy. But on the other hand, she wants what the Labour Party wants, which is an emergency budget. She wants to bring forward the rise in universal benefits, and she wants to bring forward the rise in pension credits. So these are two things that aim at people who either work part-time or don't work. Right. It's quite interesting that on the one hand that you call her a right-wing candidate, but actually, what is she? We really don't know.
Well, yeah. Well, one thing's for sure. She probably knows more about critical race theory than you. Scarlett McGrath, thank you so much for joining me. She's a former Labour advisor and also a writer. Always a pleasure to talk to you. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, after the break, we will continue with the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should Badenoch step down? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster Danny Kelly, and also the General Secretary of Free Speech Union, Toby Young. Then don't forget at 5 o'clock, it's Friday Focus. Today we're asking what these 5 candidates need to do to get the thumbs up and get the keys to number 10. Scrutinising their stance on national insurance, trans ideology, and of course, net zero. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Nana. Coming up to 4:35, here's the latest from the GB Newsroom. The remaining 5 candidates in the Conservative leadership race have outlined their plans to tackle the cost of living, the war in Ukraine and the housing crisis. In a warm-up ahead of tonight's first televised debates, Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt, Liz Truss, Tom Tugendhat and Kemi Badenoch all took part in a public hustings. Meanwhile, eliminated Attorney General Suella Braverman has given her support to Liz Truss, saying she's the candidate to unleash the opportunities of Brexit. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the country needs new government, not a new Tory leader.
We don't fear any of the candidates because the change that the United Kingdom needs is not a change at the top of the Conservative Party. We've already had 12 years of failure from the Conservative Party. The change we need, the fresh start we need for Britain, is a change of government.
David Venables has been found guilty of murdering his wife in 1982. Brenda Venables' body was found hidden in a septic tank 37 years after she disappeared. The 89-year-old retired pig farmer tried to blame serial killer Fred West for Brenda's murder, but was convicted by majority verdict at Worcester Crown Court. He's expected to be sentenced next week. A man who was part of a gang that broke into former England footballer Ashley Cole's home and threatened to cut off his fingers has been jailed for 30 years. Curtis Dilks was also ordered to serve an extended licence period of 5 years at Nottingham Crown Court. The judge said the former Chelsea and Arsenal defender and his partner suffered psychological impacts that cannot be overstated. The Foreign Office has summoned the Russian ambassador to express its deep concern following the death of British aid worker Paul Yuri, who died whilst in captivity in Russian-occupied Donetsk. Mr. Yuri was captured in late April and charged with so-called mercenary activities by separatists in the self-proclaimed republic. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says Russia must bear full responsibility for his death. The Met Office has issued its first red extreme heat warning for parts of England on Monday and Tuesday. The highest alert means there's a danger to life amid soaring temperatures. Tuesday is expected to be the hottest day, with a chance that temperatures could reach a record-breaking 40 degrees. On TV, online and on DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Back to Nana in just a moment.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Let's get a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy $1.186 and 1.176 euros. Price of gold currently standing at £1,438.29 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. And don't forget, you can download the GB News app where you can catch up with everything that we have here on the channel. But before we talk about go into our Great British Debate, let's take a look at some of the emails that have come through, because I was talking about the fact, I was asking whether you think we're ready for a person of colour to lead this country. And Karen says, this is Kemi for PM and you, Nana, for Deputy. Oh, yeah, that'd be great, wouldn't it? I'd love that. Well, Kemi does actually remind me of my younger sister. She does, she really does. Colin says, I'm a 71-year-old white man and I want Kemi for PM. The colour of her skin doesn't matter. It's what she stands for is the most important thing. And David says, character is more important, colour is irrelevant. Absolutely, I agree with you. Hear, hear. Well, let's carry on with this, because it is time for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should Kemi Badenoch step down? Now, the former Brexit Minister David Frost has urged Kemi to pull out of the Tory leadership contest so that her votes could potentially bolster those of Liz Truss, because Liz Truss is ahead in the race. But Badenoch's campaign said that she was in it to win it. So let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster Danny Kelly and also General Secretary of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young. Right, Danny, I'm going to start with you. Difficult to tell you two apart, actually. Well, I just have to work out that one of you has glasses on.
I didn't want to draw the comparison. The answer is no, I don't think she should stand down. I analogise it with a team struggling in the Football League to stay up in the final game of the season. Someone with half an interest in the European League is being asked to throw the game. Why should they? Why? Although she's only been in politics 5 years, I really like what she's talking about. That's my only caveat, though. She's been in politics for 5 years.
No, she hasn't. She's been for 20 years, actually.
But she's only been an MP for 5 years.
Yeah, but in politics for 20 years.
OK,
quite some
forgive.
time.
No, you're right. OK, so she knows the grassroots better than anyone, you could argue. And I like her stance on certain issues. She's anti-woke. I was just talking to Toby, and Toby, although I'm not on Twitter, Toby was referencing a tweet that he sent out that there could potentially almost be a Trojan horse in Penny Mordaunt if you look at what her background is with, you know, does she think that a bloke is a woman, and can a woman have a penis, and all of this nonsense?
Yeah. Penny's got form on that.
So to answer your question, she shouldn't pull out. Why should she?
What do you think, Toby?
I agree with Danny. I mean, I should start by saying I'm a huge fan of Lord Frost's. And if he was in this contest, you know, I am a member of the Conservative Party. If he got into the final two, I'd definitely vote for him. But I think he's wrong on this one. She's done incredibly well, better, I think, than anyone expected. You know, she came fourth in the last ballot. She didn't even come last. That was Tom Tugendhat. So if anyone should withdraw, it's him, not her. I think the great British public wants to see her, wants to see more of her. And being in the debates this weekend is an opportunity for them to be introduced to her. And I think she's a fantastic advertisement for the Conservative Party, whether she wins or not. So I think that's a great opportunity to get her face out there to make sure she's more widely known by the public. So I don't think she should withdraw at this point. I mean, the argument is...
point, though, you say, sounds like you feel that there will be a point where she should.
Well, if she's eliminated... if she's, say, eliminated, not in the next round when Tom, I imagine, will go out, but in the round after that, I would have thought that most of her supporters will swing in behind Liz. So they don't gain anything in particular from having her pull out now and tell her supporters to back Liz than they will, you know, in a couple of days or 3 or 4 days' time if she's going to be eliminated in 3 or 4 days' time. So I don't really see the argument as to why she should pull out now, and I can see lots of reasons why she shouldn't.
Interesting, because people are saying, and I mean, obviously, you think we'll lose Tom Tugendhat. I tend to agree. I think he'll be the next one to go. But then there will be this division of votes. And as Danny pointed out, Penny Mordaunt, you mentioned about the sort of Trojan horse thing here, because she talks about the trans issue, and she very, very clearly said that trans women are women and trans men are men. There's nothing in between. Then she sort of backtracked and came up with this sort of weird, odd statement. In fact, I've got those clips, which I might... I'll see if we can get to play Penny Mordaunt's clip, and I'll show you that in a moment.
Penny Mordaunt is the wokest candidate in this election, however much she pretends not to be woke. I mean, she got up in the House of Commons and said, trans men are men, trans women are women. We know that she tried to replace the word expectant mother with pregnant person in a bill last year. In her book, which has a foreword by Bill Gates, it's praised by Tony Blair. She says that we have a lot to learn from China. She says that we should scrap the OBE and the MBE because the E refers to empire. And she says we should remember the British Empire for its legacy of destruction. She criticises Dad's Army and It Ain't Half Hot Mum for their white privilege. I mean, you know, it's a great pitch for the leadership of the Labour Party, not of the Conservative Party. I don't know why she's in this race.
I think she's the one who should be asked to step down. I really do, because if it goes to 130,000 Conservative members, who's going to vote for that? And we need to ask her, you've changed your mind now about trans issues. OK, so what made you change your mind? Hold her to account. Hold her to account.
Well, they have, and she answered it quite loosely. I'm going to play it in the next hour. I will play the clip, so stay with me and we'll play you the 2 things that she said, the first one and the second one, some years later when she's going for the leadership. But, you know, the problem I have here is that I think that you've just made a very good point, that it should actually be her that should step down, because I think the worst result, and I suspect a lot of the Conservative Party members who can vote don't realise all of this. They don't know all of this. And these debates, I know she's going to try and get round it, but I don't think she can get round answering some of those questions. I'd like to hear what she does.
No, and I think now is the time to expose these deeply woke, non-conservative views, because they will be exposed in due course, and she'll lose tons of votes, particularly in the Red Wall, as soon as people discover what she really thinks and what she's all about. So much better to flush her out now and get her out of the contest than face the disaster of making her the leader.
That it would be. I don't understand why everyone... Even because for me, personally, I'm watching it. I'm not convinced. I'm simply not convinced by what she's saying. She might be a very nice person, but I'm listening to what Lord Frost is saying when he said that she was quite tricky to get hold of and stuff like that, and he was very surprised to see her even anywhere near the leadership. And I think we have to take note when people like that speak about people who are trying to be leaders.
May I just throw a spanner in the works about Kemi? As far as an international statesperson, yes, she's done grassroots politics for 20 years. Or 15 years, and she's been an MP for 5 years. Can you imagine her sitting down, negotiating geopolitics at the moment in the Ukraine?
I can, yes.
I can, yeah. I think she'd be ferocious.
I think they'll be scared.
At the negotiating table.
Yeah?
I don't think that Vladimir Putin will know what's happening there when he starts to speak to her, because he's somebody who is quite... He's sort of been rude about people who are homosexual. He's sort of, you know... He hasn't spoken very highly, so I think he's probably got a little bit of racism in him there, Vladimir Putin, even though he talks about how he's denazifying. He's the one that's behaving like Hitler. So I don't think he'll know.
But in world politics, don't you need to understand? For example, Gary Lineker and his hypocrisy with Qatar, with the World Cup. You know, don't you sometimes need to turn a blind eye to other people's views in order to get the deal done over the line? And if Kemi is so intransigent, if you like, with and the boundary lines are drawn with what is and what is not acceptable. I'm just wondering whether that's going to be counterproductive on the world stage.
I think a bit of intransigence in politics, actually having someone who believes what they say, has some convictions, doesn't bend with the wind and just say whatever she thinks will please the biggest person in the room. I think that would be a refreshing change. And I think the fact that she isn't at her most recent job wasn't a cabinet job and she's never been in the cabinet, I think in some ways is an advantage. It means she's not tainted by association with the record of this government. I mean, a lot of people are very unhappy for one reason or another with this government. We've got the worst cost of living crisis we've had, in 25, 30 years. Energy prices are going through the roof. Inflation is approaching 10%. People are struggling to pay the bills, struggling to put fuel in their cars, and they're angry with the present government. So the fact that she isn't a part of that government at a cabinet level, I think is an advantage.
Well, we shall see whether it is or it isn't. I'm looking forward to all those debates that are coming up this week, but this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voice to the show, your opportunity to tell us what you think about what we are discussing. Right, where should we go this hour? Should we go to Bedfordshire? Does that sound like a nice place?
Luton.
Luton! Yeah, let's go to Bedfordshire. Let's have a chat with property expert Julie Ford. Bedfordshire's a big place. Julie, talk to me. What do you think, then? Should Kemi Badenoch step down?
Hi, Nana, and just I'm not in Luton. I'm nowhere near Luton.
No, I was going to say, it's a big place, it's not Luton.
But no, to answer your question, no, I don't think she should step down. And I absolutely agree with Karen's tweet. I think Nana for deputy, for sure. For me, Kemi is someone that I've not really seen speak from a parliamentary perspective. So as general public, Rishi Sunak was basically the only one we knew, had really heard of. But I don't think he's really saying what the public want to hear. But Kemi, I mean, she's out there and she's answering direct questions with direct answers. That's new. There's not a politician out there yet that I've actually heard answer a question, indirectly or directly. I love her approach. She's very real, I think, is the best way to describe her. And to have her step down, I think that's people who are scared and they know that she is a threat, and that's why they are asking her to step down. I don't think she needs to step down, and I think that she will be, a bit of a dark horse, really, and actually come up there with the higher numbers when it comes to voting. I mean, if this came down to a general election at this particular moment, I'd certainly vote for her over everybody else that's currently running.
I think they'd desert Penny Mordaunt in their droves if they started to play out the sort of things she's been saying. Thank you so much for joining me, Julie. That is Julie Ford out there in Bedfordshire. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, after the break, the high temperatures, there's going to be a record apparently over the next couple of days. But will that affect our health? And how does it, if it will? We're discussing that next, but first, let's have a break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. They're saying that there is going to be some serious weather. There is a red extreme weather warning that has been issued by the Met Office for parts of this country next week. That's meaning that there is risk to life because temperatures are likely to hit 40 degrees Celsius. Now, it points out that there being a danger to life with the risk of illness not limited to vulnerable people. So basically anybody. This highest warning, covering London and parts of central England, warns of widespread impacts to people's lives. So I'm joined now in the studio by author of Your Health in Your Hands, Dr. Emeka
Okorocha.
I was going to say, I just say
Dr. Emeka Okorocha.
Yes, I knew. I just said.
You got there in the end.
At the same time as me.
Okay.
Right, listen, they're saying there's a danger to life and all this. I do my heat yoga. It's about 40 degrees. I do my exercise in there. It's okay if you move slowly, isn't it?
There are a few other things you should be doing other than just moving slowly. So one, obviously, staying in the shade if you can, especially around the hours between 11 and 3, because this is when the sun is at its highest, and remain hydrated. One thing people get is heat exhaustion, and that leads to heat stroke. So what we're telling people now is to avoid getting into A&E, please remain hydrated, try and wear cool clothing, try and stay out the sun if you can, because a lot of people, they go out, they want to have fun, they want to drink alcohol, which can dehydrate you, and before you know it, it creeps up on you. You're suffering from symptoms of heat exhaustion, which could be like confusion, excessive sweating, feeling very thirsty. And if you're not cooled down within 30 minutes, that's when this could develop into heat stroke. And heat stroke is what brings you to me into A&E. And that's when people get really confused, unresponsive.
Did you say heat stroke brings us to you?
Yeah.
I'm drawn
Don't try and get heat stroke. Don't try and, trust me, don't try and get heat stroke. Yeah, it's the signs and symptoms that I worry about and we try and, educate people about. So if you see someone and they're feeling really unwell, they're feeling dizzy, they need to sit down, try and get them some cold water, get them in some shade, maybe spray some water on them. And then if they're not cooled down in 30 minutes, that's when I'd call medical services, because that could develop into heat stroke, which is a medical emergency.
Now, people are always talking about water. What about things like coconut water and things like that? Because they have the hydration of the right potassium levels and mineral salts and so on.
Yeah, anything with electrolytes, even like sports drinks can help. So anything that can balance your electrolytes, but as well as give you HGO can help. The stuff we try and avoid too much is obviously like caffeinated drinks.
Alcohol.
Alcohol, definitely, which is a big one, because a lot of people, they want to get the beers on and enjoy the sun, but a lot of the time it can creep up on you, and a lot of people don't realise they're suffering from heat exhaustion. And if you don't realise the signs and symptoms, that's when it could develop and get worse. And it's something that we do see in A&E quite often around this time of year. Yeah.
So what are the signs and symptoms? I don't know whether I'd notice if I had it.
So the signs and symptoms are different depending on the severity. So with most people, when it comes to heat exhaustion, this is something that you can reverse within about 30 minutes by getting into a cool place and hydrating yourself. That's when you're feeling excessively thirsty, you can feel a bit dizzy, a bit lightheaded, very nauseous, just feeling very uncomfortable. So in those instances, I would say if you see someone like that, make sure you stay with them, get them to a cool place, hydrate them, and then watch and manage them. When it gets to heat stroke, now this is a medical emergency, so these are signs you need to recognize. So if somebody suffers from a seizure and they're not epileptic, if somebody gets unresponsive, they get severely confused, they stop sweating, so their body shuts down and they actually stop sweating, they're hot to touch, this is when you need to at least call 111, if not 999, and make sure you get them to medical services.
But it takes them a long time to get to you. You'll be dead by the time they get to you.
Hopefully not.
You know it, though. It's bad, though, isn't it?
Hopefully.
It's pretty bad out there,
It's difficult.
We're going to be overrun, aren't we, with people who don't listen.
That's why there's so many things to do to prevent the fact of getting to heat exhaustion and heat stroke. It's stuff I mentioned in my book, Your Health in Your Hands, and there are a lot of little caveats that people can do to even prevent getting to that level, such as obviously remaining hydrated, making sure you're taking care of your skin. With sunscreen, you should be having at least SPF 30, as you know.
Sunscreen?
Yeah, I do use sunscreen.
50. I use 50.
Any types of skin types. The general misconception is, if you're darker skinned or if you're in England, you don't need it. Only on holiday for people who are pale or whatnot. It's not true. Anyone can get some sort of skin damage, so make sure you have sunscreen, at least some protection factor 30. And you should be protecting your eyes as well.
Yeah, of course.
So sunglasses, shades, anything reflective, as well, is very beneficial.
And for God's sake, don't look into the sun.
And one other thing is, I do warn people in terms of infants and kids, make sure they're in the shade and they have sunscreen too, because obviously they can't tell you a lot
Yeah,
at
you
the time
see
when they're
people
burning.
pushing a pram with the
Yeah,
baby.
exactly.
And I'm like, the baby.
The baby needs to be
Baby's
in
a
the
lobster,
shade.
man.
Yeah, and don't put babies in direct heat.
No.
Don't put babies in direct heat and sunlight. I wouldn't suggest it. So that's one thing to take away from this.
Keep your eyes on your baby and things like that. Don't forget. Don't forget.
Yeah, wear light clothing, hopefully loose. I mean, I'm not the best for loose clothing, but at least it's light, right?
You don't need loose clothing.
light, loose clothing. Try and avoid tight black clothes because that's just going to absorb heat and increase your core body temperature, and that can lead to heat exhaustion.
It's interesting because in some of the hottest countries where they wear the burqa, the full burqa, and they wear the black burqa as well.
But at least these burqas are loose fitting.
Yeah,
that's a good thing. So obviously they will absorb a lot more heat, but these burqas are looser fitting. So if I were you, looser fitting clothes.
Looser fitting.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Cover up.
And yeah, exactly. And any body part that is exposed, make sure you do have sunscreen on it.
Yeah, listen, Dr. Emeka. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm not going to say the other thing. No, I wasn't going to say it. I'm not going to risk that. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Well, see, we're always whinging, aren't we, about the weather here? But I'm really pleased that it's going to be hot, but obviously take all the precautions. Right, so for the Great British Debate this hour, I've been asking, should Kemi Badenoch step down? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Terry says, no chance. Liz should step down. Kemi is the future and would wind up and wipe out the Labour Party. Let's see, Warren says that Kemi is the Tories' only chance to win the next election. The rest are self-serving career politicians who don't care about the people. I believe Kemi does care about this nation and its people. Did you see that as well with, what's his name, Rishi Sunak, and the fact that he spelled campaign wrong? I mean, didn't somebody tell him? John says she's everything Labour hates, a woman that happens to be black and doesn't play the victim. And Glenn says, Kemi should definitely not stand down. Today was the first time I've seen Kemi. I think Frosty should shut up. It's a shame we can't choose the new Prime Minister ourselves. Well, interesting stuff. Keep your thoughts coming. On the way, it's Friday Focus. We'll be looking at those candidates more individually, but you're watching me. This is GB News. You're also listening on digital radio. More in the next hour. So good afternoon. It's just gone 5 o'clock. We are live. Now, for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Just past 5 o'clock, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The family of Archie Battersby say they'll try and appeal against the latest High Court ruling that doctors can lawfully stop providing his life support treatment. It follows a review of evidence at a hearing in London today. The 12-year-old suffered a catastrophic brain injury 3 months ago. Last month, a High Court judge ruled that he was brainstem dead. His parents successfully challenged that judgment in the Court of Appeal and were fighting for treatment to continue. Speaking to GB News, Archie's mum said they won't give up.
So I can't go no further. That's my little boy. I've had, obviously not a lot of people are sceptical, but I've had healers work with Archie and they're all saying he's there and he's asking for more time. I will honour Archie. He wants more time for whatever reason he wants more time for. Whether it's to pull through or not to pull through, I will get my little boy as much time as he needs. So I'll keep fighting for him.
The remaining 5 candidates in the Conservative leadership race have outlined their plans to tackle the cost of living, the war in the Ukraine and the housing crisis. In a warm-up ahead of tonight's first televised debates, Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt, Liz Truss, Tom Tugendhat and Kemi Badenoch all made their case to replace Boris Johnson. Meanwhile, eliminated candidate Attorney General Suella Braverman has given her support to Liz Truss, saying she'll unleash the opportunities of Brexit. However, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the country needs new government, not a new Tory in number 10.
We don't fear any of the candidates because the change that the United Kingdom needs is not a change at the top of the Conservative Party. We've already had 12 years of failure from the Conservative Party. The change we need, the fresh start we need for Britain, is a change of government.
The Foreign Office has summoned the Russian ambassador to express its deep concern following the death of British aid worker Paul Yuri, who died whilst in captivity in Russian-occupied Donetsk. Mr. Yuri was captured in late April and charged with so-called mercenary activities by separatists in the self-proclaimed republic. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says Russia must bear full responsibility for his death. David Venables has been found guilty of murdering his wife in 1982. The body of Brenda Venables was found hidden in a septic tank 37 years after she disappeared. The 89-year-old retired pig farmer tried to blame serial killer Fred West for her murder, but was convicted by a majority verdict at Worcester Crown Court. He's expected to be sentenced next week. A man who was part of a gang that broke into former England footballer Ashley Cole's home and threatened to cut off his fingers has been jailed for 30 years. Curtis Dilks was also ordered to serve an extended licence period of 5 years at Nottingham Crown Court. The judge said the former Chelsea and Arsenal defender and his partner suffered psychological impacts that cannot be overstated. Another 2 rail strikes are now scheduled to take place next month. RMT members at Network Rail and 14 train operators say they'll walk out on August the 18th and the 20th in a dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. It's after RMT and ASLEF members announced that they'll be striking on the 27th and the 30th of July as well. US President Joe Biden has landed in Saudi Arabia in the last leg of his Middle East tour. He's expected to hold meetings with King Salman and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The White House says they will be discussing a range of issues, including energy security and human rights. The president arrived after holding meetings with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in the West Bank earlier today. The Met Office has issued its first red extreme heat warning for parts of England on Monday and Tuesday. The highest alert means there's a danger to life amid soaring temperatures. It's as the NHS faces a surge in hospital admissions. Tuesday is expected to be the hottest day, with a chance that temperatures could reach a record-breaking 40 degrees. Meteorologist John Hammond says it'll impact everyone and action should be taken.
The impacts will be major. They're not going to last forever. It'll all be over by Wednesday. But for Monday and Tuesday, impacts to infrastructure, transport, health. And I would imagine that many schools will be closed as well, because this country can't cope with 35 degrees. But when we're talking about the potential for 40 degrees, then I think all actions that can be taken should be taken.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Nana Akua.
Welcome aboard. If you've just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's Danny Kelly and also Toby Young. Still to come, each Friday at 5, I put a spotlight on a particular guest or a subject matter in Friday Focus. And today, we'll be looking at who is left in the race to be the new Conservative leader. The remaining 5 candidates in the Conservative leadership race have outlined their plans to tackle the cost of living, the war in Ukraine, and also the housing crisis. In a warm-up debate ahead of tonight's first televised debates, Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt, Liz Truss and Tom Tugendhat, alongside Kemi Badenoch, all took part in public hustings. In our Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we nationalise our water companies? Now, a report by Parliament's Environmental Audit Committee concluded that not a single river in England is free from pollution. And this week, Environment Agency bosses floated the idea of prosecution for water company bosses who have contributed to the sector's worst performance for years. So for my Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking you whether we should renationalise our water companies. You can get your thoughts in via email at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. It's 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. It's time for Friday Focus. And today, we're honing in on the candidates left in the Conservative leadership race. Attorney General Suava Braverman was the latest to fall out of it, to replace the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. There are now 5 candidates left battling it out to lead the Conservative Party and ultimately the country. The second round of ballots has maintained ex-Chancellor Rishi Sunak's position as the front runner. Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt who came second, although lots of people think that she will win with this particular comment, although she has been plagued by a few things that she said, including this one on trans issues.
But let me say, in proposing them from this dispatch box, that trans men are men, trans women are women, and great care has been taken in the drafting of and the accepting of these amendments to ensure that that message has been got across.
But when launching her campaign yesterday, the former Trade Minister seemed to strike a different tone.
Chris Hope, last question.
Apparently, last one, a quick one and a straightforward one. How do you define a woman?
I'm a woman. I am biologically a woman. And I can tell you, Chris, that if you have been in the Royal Navy and you have competed physically against men, you understand the biological difference between men and women.
Yes, I saw very well, but in her first comment, it didn't sound like she did. I'm joined by Dr. Craig Prescott. He's the director at the Centre for Parliament and Public Law at the University of Winchester. So, Doctor, thank you so much for speaking to us, Craig. So what do you think about this? And what happens next in this race?
Well, hello, it's good to join you. What happens is essentially we have another ballot on Monday, and the candidate with the fewest votes gets knocked out. So that will leave us with 4, presumably. And then we'll have another ballot on Tuesday, and if necessary, another ballot on Wednesday. So it is essentially straight knockout from here on in until we're left with 2 candidates to go to the party membership over the next 2 months.
Why would it take... Well, how come it's going to take them 2 months to go around the party membership? I'm just wondering why. That, you know, should they get this done? This could be over within a couple of weeks.
Well, that is a very good question. That is the timetable that they've laid down. The Conservative Party's chosen that. It ties in nicely with the recess that Parliament will be in. So Parliament goes on recess, and essentially it's summer holidays from Thursday, and comes back in that first week in September. So it ties in nicely with that and allows the candidates to have a series of hustings around the country so different party members can attend. And then there's time for people to cast their votes however they wish, I suppose.
Now,
it does tie in with that campaign. I think that's worth saying.
Now, we know, obviously, that there are 5 left. And so in order to sort of clarify, I wonder how much you know about each of them. I mean, can we talk about 3 sort of issues around them? Because, I mean, there's net zero, which I think is a big issue, tax, and also trans issues. So I'm wondering, do we know where Tom Tugendhat stands on those issues?
Well, that's an interesting... Tugendhat certainly has furnished his tax-cutting credentials, I think, in his campaign so far. I think the interesting thing with Tugendhat is that primarily, if you follow Parliament, you know him essentially as a foreign policy expert. And it has been interesting in the months leading up to this and in the past few weeks. He has started to talk about domestic policy before, but I think that's more likely to be his weaker point in many ways, because that's something that he hasn't been involved in the cut and thrust of in the same way. You know, in the hustings today, this afternoon with Conservative Home, he was speaking very much about his foreign policy experience, the fact he's been sanctioned by Russia and China, and the fact that he was once in the army, as he's mentioned on several occasions.
Well, this is what he said, because they were all asked what their weaknesses were, and this is what Tom Tugendhat said about his.
It'd be wrong to think that it's a one-size-fits-all. I know that it's not for everybody, and I do know that that we do have to find many other organisations that help in different ways. And one of the things I definitely celebrate in Number 10 is, of course, not just the uniformed services like the ambulances and our medical provision, but also the businesses and the communities and the families that do so much and are absolutely essential to supporting us. So restoring trust with them and getting a clean start on that. Emphasis on the army may be something I need to work on.
Interesting. See, so he talks a lot about the army, but he can at least identify his weaknesses. Now, I'm just wondering, Kemi Badenoch, we've been talking about her quite a bit, and there's been speak from Lord Frost that she should step down so that potentially to get Liz Truss further ahead, because obviously they seem to be worried that Penny Mordaunt could end up being the leader. What do you think on that particular issue?
Well, I think it's a bit rich, really, for supporters of Liz Truss to say that other candidates should step down merely to make way for Liz Truss. I think Kemi has added to the contest so far. She's brought different perspectives to it, a difference of approach, maybe an indication of what the next generation of Conservative might be like. And so as a mere observer of this, I think she's added to the contest. And I certainly don't see why she should stand down. The Suella Braverman's vote to play for, she was knocked out in the last round. And, perhaps if Tugendhat gets knocked out in the round on Monday, there are quite a few votes sort of floating about. And, the lie of the land might look very different on Tuesday as to how it looks right now.
Sunak then, because he's been knocking about, but you may have noticed in his particular campaign video, he actually had the word campaign spelt wrongly. Did you notice that?
I did notice that in the hustings this afternoon, which shows that perhaps even if you are the slickest campaign and perhaps one of the best prepared, that things can go wrong and you can make mistakes along the way. Perhaps in some senses it might not. It might show the fact that he isn't as slick as people realise, that his campaign isn't perhaps as well prepared as people thought. People were thinking that he's been planning this in for months, and that might indicate that it might not be entirely the case.
On purpose to make us think exactly what you've just said there, Craig. Thank you very much for talking to me. That is Dr. Craig Prescott. He's the Director at the Centre for Parliament and Public Law at the University of Winchester. Right, I'm also joined by Sir John Curtis. He's a polling expert and Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. Thank you very much, Sir John, for joining me. Right, so who gets your vote as the most likely to win this thing?
To be honest, I really don't think I know who's going to win this election, not least because the polling is not entirely consistent. YouGov has certainly been sending out in their polling a fairly strong message that assuming she makes it to the ballot, and of course that isn't guaranteed at the moment because Liz Truss might overtake her, that Penny Mordaunt would be the selection of the membership. However, there's other polling out there, one done for the Unheard website, also polling done by Opinium, isn't as favourable to Penny Mordaunt as is that by YouGov amongst members in general, although I think it is pretty clear, both from YouGov's polling of members, but also polling of the wider public, that Penny Mordaunt certainly has improved her profile during the course of last week. One of the things, of course, is crucial about her, and it's also true, by the way, of Kemi Badenoch, is that, just largely an unknown. I mean, if either Penny Mordaunt or Kemi Badenoch were to become Prime Minister, they would be the least well-known Prime Minister in modern British history, at least on coming into office. Now, Penny Mordaunt, slowly people are forming a view about her, and in forming a view, it looks as though rather more people are coming to a favourable view than an unfavourable view one. But the truth is, it's still very difficult to know what the wider public would make either of her or of Kemi Badenoch, if indeed they were to get into the final two.
Well, Sir John, let's listen to what they said about their weaknesses, because I'm wondering what effect that the hustings had on it. So this is what Kemi said about her weaknesses.
My greatest weakness is probably allowing my sense of humour to look like I'm flippant about issues.
That's Penny, right? And that's Kemi. This is what Penny said of her weaknesses.
I think all of us are going to need to build a team of all the talents in the party. We all have different backgrounds. We all have different strengths and weaknesses, but the team is what hasn't been at the heart of a government. And it's got to be less about just the person in that top job. It's got to be everyone around the cabinet table and really empowered ministers of state with very clear deliverables and a timetable. And that is the only way we're going to get things going.
So she didn't really say that she was weak at anything there, by the sounds of it. Well, do you think that these? Do you think that they would have had much effect? Did you know? Is there anything in the offings that can you sense any change in terms of polling?
Well, first thing to say, I mean, Penny Mordaunt used the question to convey two central political messages in her campaign. One, of course, is that she's trying to suggest that because she's not been in cabinet, she's well distanced from Boris Johnson. And secondly, very much, I think, hoping that perhaps she might be the compromise candidate, the candidate that can bring together both those on the more pro-Brexit wing of the party together with those who perhaps have never been quite so convinced about Brexit, and equally bring together the tax cutters and those who are perhaps not quite so ardent about tax cuts. Both those messages were conveyed very effectively in that intervention. I think in truth, however, and in this next 72 hours could be crucial to her chances and indeed to Kemi's chances, because I think Tory MPs will be looking for two things about these relative unknowns. One is, do I think that they would succeed in being able to dominate the House of Commons at Prime Minister's questions? And secondly, are they somebody who can appeal to the wider public? Now, one of the reasons why Rishi Sunak is still ahead, although Rishi Sunak, frankly, is still nothing like as popular as he was before he got caught up in Partygate and then the row about the non-dom status of his wife, is the one thing we do know he's a very, very effective public speaker. He was Boris Johnson's choice in 2019 when Boris Johnson himself wasn't going to take place in leadership debates. So, we know, I think, that he can command an audience. Less clear how popular he is. But that, I think, is the benchmark for the other candidates, is can they demonstrate, A, the same kind of command as the former Chancellor, B, in so doing, create a higher degree of popularity than Rishi Sunak now commands.
Well, we'll find out, won't we, in the next few days. So, John Curtis, thank you so much. He's a polling expert. Right, let's get quickly back to my panel, Toby Young and also Danny Kelly. Yeah, the polls seem to be, I think we're on very shaky ground with Penny Mordaunt over these next 3 days. I think she's going to say something that's going to create a huge cravat.
Yeah, well, I hope that as people get to know her a bit better and do some proper due diligence about what she actually believes, that her campaign will collapse. My fear is that actually she'll continue to perform quite well and people will think, crikey, if we don't put up someone capable of beating her in the runoff, then she could end up as the next Prime Minister. And that, I think, could hurt Rishi because of the polling John Curtis referred to, showing that in a runoff between those two, Penny would beat Rishi. I think it's less clear-cut if it was a runoff between Penny and Liz or Penny and Kemi. I mean, imagine a runoff between Penny and Kemi. That would be two very different visions of the Conservative Party and its future. Very different. And I think Kemi would come out on top in that contest.
The more I see Kemi, the more I think she is the embodiment of political perfection. Her only failure in politics is that she's got a great sense of humour. She's flawless. Yeah. She's setting herself up for a fall.
That was the best answer to that. What is your biggest weakness question? Rishi's answer was, I just work too hard. I'm too much of a perfectionist.
It's all about him.
That's the cliched answer. Yeah,
well, he says he's too much of a perfectionist. I wonder if we can get a quick clip of Rishi again, if we can see the campaign and his the bad spelling in his campaign, because he spelt that, they spelt that incorrectly. Well, we'll bring that to you after the break, because we do have it, and we played it initially in the monologues.
I'm going to add another analogy. I'm in the car game, Toby, as well as a journalist. Penny Mordaunt is like a car that looks as if it's in showroom condition, but the closer you get to it, you can see it's had a load of paintwork, it's been in a couple of accidents, and it's still on finance.
No, I would say that she's like storage hunters. You never know what's in the box, but take a risk, buy it. There could be nothing in there. Right, coming up, it's time for our Great British Debate This Out. I'm asking, should we renationalise our water companies? But first, let's get an update with the weather.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin. A rare Met Office red warning has now been issued for the extreme heat likely on Monday and Tuesday. These temperatures are potentially unprecedented and likely to cause health issue and impacts on infrastructure. High pressure is moving in. Actually, it's gonna bring most of us just a fine summer's weekend, but temperatures will be ticking up more particularly early next week. Temperatures actually drop quite nicely overnight tonight, a reasonable night for sleeping. A few showers across northeastern England, they're fading away. We'll see a bit of drizzly rain in the far northwest by morning, but for most it's a dry night and a clear night, and as I said, reasonably comfortable, single figures in some rural locations. That'll lead into a pleasant summer's day on Saturday for the vast majority. Lots of blue sky. The sun is strong though. UV levels are likely to be high. The main exception will be northern Scotland, where there will be some rain drifting across the Northern Isles and a few showers for the Highlands and the Western Isles. But otherwise, plenty of sunshine, light winds, and temperatures just getting into the low to mid-20s for the vast majority, maybe 27 or 28 across the southeast. However, the temperatures will be ticking up as we go through the next few days. Through Saturday evening, a bit more rain trickling into Northern Ireland, and we'll see showery rain spreading during the evening across parts of Scotland too. For England and Wales, again, a balmy summer's evening on Saturday evening, leading into another sunny and fine day on Sunday. We start with a lot of cloud though across Scotland on Sunday. The rain pushing away to the north, so sunny spells developing for central Scotland, southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. Temperatures will be a notch higher on Sunday, likely to be over 30 Celsius in places once more before we go to the next level into the early part of next week. Extreme temperatures are likely as the high pulls away and we drop even hotter air from Spain and Portugal. That is why we have these extreme heat warnings in place, including a red warning. Keep up to date with the forecast and the warnings on the Met Office website.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good afternoon. If you just joined me, where on earth have you been? This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. It's just coming up to 27 minutes after 5 o'clock. Well, it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking... Oh, look, this is Rishi Sunak. Remember I promised that I would bring you that clip of Rishi Sunak where the campaign word is spelt wrong. Let's have a look. I know we can't bring it back now because somebody's pressed the wrong buttons and brought in the wrong thing. If you're watching on TV, you'll notice it. If you are listening on radio, you wouldn't, but I've just told you about it. Right, well, we'll bring it back to you, but it's time for our Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should we nationalise our water companies? The UK's Environment Agency has ranked 6 out of 9 water companies as requiring significant improvement, and Chairwoman Emma Howard-Boyd stated much stricter penalties are required to prevent companies dumping sewage into our rivers. Now, the report follows renewed calls for water to be taken into public ownership, a staple of Jeremy Corbyn's 2019 manifesto. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we renationalise our water companies? I'm joined now by Kat Hobbs. She's the founder and director of We Own It, which campaigns against privatisation. Right, Kat, so I'm going to ask you, first of all, do you think that public ownership would actually improve the situation?
Good afternoon, Nana. Well, I think it would definitely improve the situation, because what we have right now with the privatised water industry in England is a completely crazy situation where since 1989, we, the British public, have been paying out £2 billion a year to shareholders. The water companies have racked up a debt of 53 billion. We've got 400,000 incidents of sewage going into our rivers and seas. We've got leakage levels of around 25%, so around a quarter of our water is leaking away every day. Our water bills have gone up by 40%. Privatisation was supposed to bring them down. So really the track record of these privatised water companies that we have here in England is absolutely atrocious. They're treating the British public like cash machines, and they're treating our rivers and seas like sewers, and it has to stop.
Very great. That's a great analogy, actually. What about the cost of the taxpayer, though? Because even though they are obviously private companies, if they go badly wrong, we're going to be the ones that pick up the tab, right?
Yeah, that's right. So what I think we have to do is look at what is normal in other countries, because this situation in England is very unique. We sold off all of our assets as well as the rights to provide our water. So we have a handful of monopolies. So you don't get any choice, by the way, as a consumer, as a customer. The water comes out of your tap. You have one set of pipes. It is a monopoly. And that means, you know, the normal rules of the market don't apply. But we can look at other countries to see how to do this in a sensible way. For example, in Scotland, they didn't privatise their water. Their water is in public ownership. That means that for every single household in Scotland, £72 extra every year has been going into the infrastructure, dealing with things like leaks, stopping things like sewage spills. So if England had done the same as Scotland, we would have spent an extra £28 billion on our infrastructure, and we could have really improved our system, brought down bills, cleaned up our rivers and seas, and actually done the job that water companies are supposed to do.
Of course, there's obviously the downside to health as well. Kat Hobbs, thank you very much for giving us that bit of information. She's the founder and director of We Own It. Right, I'm also joined by Sir John Redwood, MP for Wokingham. Sir John, thank you for joining me. What do you think? Because the real issue here is that companies are dumping waste into our rivers. Now, I know there are rules as to how far you can dump and so on and so forth, but should they actually be allowed to be doing this?
No, of course they shouldn't. And the regulator is toughening up with a lot of encouragement from myself and many other parliamentarians. The standards are not good enough, and we need a very major investment programme to make sure that when there's excess water in the system, they don't simply flood our rivers with dirty water in a way which is totally unacceptable. But what we have to remember is that when we had a nationalised industry, it was even worse. We had a reputation of having many more dirty beaches than the rest of Europe, because then this was a very regular occurrence, and it also spilled over in our leading coastal places. And there was a major clean-up of beaches, which has represented some progress. We clearly need a lot more investment money going into this industry. It was always starved of cash when it had to compete against the house service and schools as part of the nationalised system. The idea was to liberate it to raise much more money. The regulator has in recent years been stopping it raising so much money by very strict price controls. We need to review how much they can now raise and how quickly they can do the very big works that are needed to accommodate a greatly increasing population.
But isn't it a conflict of interest for for the water industry to be privatised in this fashion? Because surely it's a little bit like, I would say, energy, that it's something that we, the public, should own. Maybe we did a bad job before, but we must make sure this time we do a good job in ownership of it. But surely we should protect it because it is obviously life.
Well, we do own it through our pension funds and through our savings and investments. We own it collectively, and we can have choices as to whether we wish to have a shareholding in it through the way that people hold their long-term savings. Most importantly, it means that the people who own the businesses have to make their own assessment of risk. And if they get it wrong, then it would be at their expense rather than at the taxpayer expense. But I must stress that one of the main reasons that encouraged us to privatize the water industry in the 1980s was the dreadful record of the industry in terms of keeping our beaches and our rivers clean. And also there were some incidents over water supply. And it was thought that an arm's length industry with tougher regulatory standards and access to far more capital would do a better job. It has done a bit better job. The job is not nearly good enough at the moment. I think growing population is part of the pressure on the system. And it does mean, I'm afraid, that we're going to need to dig up a lot of streets and have quite a lot of disruptive works in order to put in the extra capacity which a growing population clearly needs.
Well, Sir John Redwood MP, thank you very much for talking to us. He's a Conservative MP for Wokingham. Right, if you've just joined me, welcome. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, we will continue with our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should we renationalise our water companies? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Danny Kelly, who's a broadcaster, and also Toby Young. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Nana. Coming up to 5:34, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The 5 remaining candidates in the Tory leadership contest have outlined their plans to tackle the cost of living, the war in Ukraine and the housing crisis. Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt, Liz Truss, Tom Tugendhat and Kemi Badenoch all took part in an online warm-up ahead of tonight's first televised debate. Meanwhile, eliminated candidate Suella Braverman has given her support to Liz Truss, saying she'll unleash the opportunities of Brexit. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the country needs new government, not another Tory in number 10.
We don't fear any of the candidates because the change that the United Kingdom needs is not a change at the top of the Conservative Party. We've already had 12 years of failure from the Conservative Party. The change we need, the fresh start we need for Britain, is a change of government.
David Venables has been found guilty of murdering his wife in 1982. The body of Brenda Venables was found hidden in a septic tank 37 years after she disappeared. The 89-year-old retired pig farmer tried to blame serial killer Fred West for Brenda's murder, but was convicted by majority verdict at Worcester Crown Court. He's expected to be sentenced next week. A man who was part of a gang that broke into former England footballer Ashley Cole's home and threatened to cut off his fingers has been jailed for 30 years. Curtis Dilks has also been ordered to serve an extended licence period of 5 years. The judge said the former Chelsea and Arsenal defender and his partner suffered psychological impacts that cannot be overstated. The Foreign Office has summoned the Russian ambassador to express its deep concern following the death of British aid worker Paul Yuri, who died whilst in captivity in Russian-occupied Donetsk. Mr. Yuri was captured in late April and charged with so-called mercenary activities by separatists in the self-proclaimed republic. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says Russia must bear full responsibility for his death. The Met Office has issued its first red extreme heat warning for parts of England on Monday and Tuesday. The highest alert means there's a danger to life amid soaring temperatures. Tuesday is expected to be the hottest day, with a chance that temperatures could reach a record-breaking 40 degrees. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back to Nana Akua, just a moment.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Time for a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy 1.185 US dollars and 1.175 euros. The price of gold currently standing at £1,438 and 3 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Right, well, good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, earlier in Friday Focus, we were talking about the different candidates because, I mean, initially I didn't know who I was going to vote for. If I could vote, I don't know who I'd go for. But Stuart sent me a message and he goes, as expected, another attempt to destroy Penny Mordaunt's campaign and influence the election in a completely partisan manner, contrary to any impartiality considerations. I mean, honestly, look, we're not trying to destroy Penny Mordaunt. We are commenting specifically on a comment that she made with regard to trans issues, where she said that a trans man is a man and a trans woman is a woman. She said that. She should own it. That's not to destroy her. If she hadn't said that, I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't be commenting on it. But yes, keep your thoughts coming there, because we do always like to hear people who think differently. I mean, Penny Mordaunt is the master of her own destiny, not me. Right, let's return to our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should we renationalise our water companies? Now, the UK's Environment Agency has ranked 6 out of 9 water companies as requiring significant improvement. The report follows renewed calls for water to be taken into public ownership, now a staple of Jeremy Corbyn's 2019 manifesto. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we nationalise our water companies? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster Danny Kelly, and also General Secretary of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young. Right, well, that's not Toby. No, it hasn't. They just said it's frozen, but that's just Danny not moving his head. It's just Danny not moving his head. Yes, so Danny, you're an expert so far on water. You've talked about it. You said you just Googled it about 5 minutes ago. Now you know everything you need to know.
I'm a recent convert to socialism and water nationalisation. I think it's an awful idea. 30 years ago, our beaches were highly polluted. Our rivers and lakes were highly polluted. In fact, wildlife was literally dying in front of our very eyes. So it was farmed off to the private sector. Don't forget, there are experts. The reason privatisation doesn't work is that there are people with commercial backgrounds who know how to run government departments. OK, so they're experts. And the very fact, it's not a panacea that the First Lady thinks it is, in my view. Since then, more of our beaches have become world-class. Dead areas of water where there was no wildlife is now bursting with wildlife. And also what she said was very interesting, because she said in Scotland, where it's nationalised, they still have all the same problems that we have here with the private firms. So we should find them.
She didn't quite say that. She sort of said that actually more money comes back. Well, but she said that...
She said there was still leaking pipes all over the place.
No. She said that about, I think it was something like 72 pence or £72 per person is made from the water companies, which then goes back into the...
No, but my point is that in Scotland they still have all the same problems that we have here. Forget money. It's all about whether there is leaking pipes underneath the pavements and roads of this country. I'm with John Redwoods. You know, we need to remember how awful it was. And start fining these companies. Start fining them.
Yeah, the Environment Agency was very critical of the water companies in its report it published earlier this week, said that it should be have the power to send some of them to jail for polluting our waterways. But, you know, the Environment Agency they're the regulator. It's their job to make sure these companies behave properly. You know, they need to raise their game. But I agree with Danny. I mean, you know, for a certain section of the left, you know, nationalisation is a cure-all panacea for all our ills. What does that mean in reality? It means increasing public expenditure, growing the size of the state, likely putting up taxes. We need to do the opposite of that. We need to start shrinking the size of the state, cutting public expenditure, so we can cut people's taxes and let people take home more of the money they earn at work. I mean, as Danny said, things weren't better in the old days. It's like people who complain about, you know, Virgin Trains or South West Trains, imagining that it was much better under British Rail. I'm old enough to remember how terrible it was under British Rail. And I remember as a child being told, you know, you can't go swimming in the Thames. No, don't go swimming in that river. It's dirty, it's polluted. We weren't surrounded by dolphins splashing around in the Thames 35 years ago prior to water privatisation. So, yeah, I don't see how nationalisation is going to solve this problem. The Environment Agency needs to raise its game.
I actually disagree with both of you. I think that water is one of those vital resources that we need to own. I don't like the fact that water companies are owned by companies all around the world, foreign companies, because as you saw with things like the vaccine, when there was an issue with COVID, you couldn't get hold of PPE. We didn't even make any PPE, so we had to go and try and outsource it. And, of course, the PPE from those manufacturers within those countries decided to keep it for themselves, which you would do. That's a normal thing. I think we let ourselves to... in terms of war, I think there's a risk. It would be easy. You could pollute waterways as a way of biological warfare. I don't think that something like water should be owned by companies. I think there's vested interests there as well. So why would they want to invest the money back into the water companies? As they said, £2 billion worth of that investment went to shareholders. I don't think there are some industries that should never be privatised, and I believe that water is actually one of them.
Nana, just clarify the biological warfare.
Well, for example, if you're at war with, say, I don't know, China, for example, and they have Chinese companies that own the water system, you can put anything in a water system.
Do we have Chinese companies?
No, but we have. I think we have French companies who own our water.
They're allies.
We're not at war yet, but you can be. Anyone can be your ally until.
But surely that's a risk, even if water is owned publicly. I mean, there's still a risk. It could be used in biological.
But why should you extend that risk in that manner? I believe we should own that. For example, in terms of money, then when it comes to, if you look at the energy that a lot of people are relying on Russia, I would say we've all understood now that we need to make our own and create our own energy. You're a big advocate of fracking because you're saying we should all have our energy in-house. Well, what's the difference with water?
Well, because it's cheaper. Fracking is cheaper and it's on our doorstep.
But again, I'm saying that the argument is not about the money. I'm saying the argument is about safety and security, energy security, water security. We need to own it.
Have you set any, or do you know of any precedents around the world where there's been biological warfare into the water system?
Well, not off the top of my head, but if you want me to do I'll ask my producer to do a bit of research.
I just don't think that's likely.
Yeah, but there's a lot of things you didn't think likely. I didn't think it was likely that Russia would behave in the way they have, or that Vladimir Putin would threaten nuclear war. I didn't think that was likely. I thought the whole reason why we had those was to protect ourselves from each other so that people wouldn't do that. I didn't expect that stalemate that happens when somebody threatens it and you think, oh, actually, I can't do it because then you'll do it back and then it's all over. So there's a lot of things that people didn't consider.
One thing we can agree, with red-hot weather like this, unfortunately, people throw themselves into open water like quarries that have been filled in, and so many people lose their lives. And unfortunately, I'm going to predict that on Wednesday morning we'll hear of people who've lost their lives because it's red hot on the surface. You dive in, it's ice cold, and your feet become entangled in shopping trolleys and stolen cars that have been dumped. It happens all the time.
Don't you do it? You'll sink straight to the bottom, mate. I'm teasing you. In the whole show, I hadn't said anything to you.
She bite her lip. Just challenge her biological warfare theory, and all of a sudden the big fat guy sitting next to her.
Serves you right. What do you think, Toby, then, finally? Final words to you.
I can't think of a single industry that is better managed by the state. Not water, not energy, certainly not Certainly not television, as Danny can tell us.
Oh,
So we don't need state-owned TV. We don't need our water to be owned by the state either. I think the regulator just needs to start doing a better job.
OK, fair enough. You got the last word. Let's see what our Great British Voice says, because this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome them onto the show. Right, where should we go to now? What do you think? Should we go to... Is it Cornwall? Is he around there?
No, that's
or should we go
Cornwall.
to... Oh, no, let's go to London. Yeah, let's go to London instead. There's Jonathan Jones. He's there in London. Right, Jonathan, how come you're in London? Aren't you usually somewhere else? Have you moved?
Well, we have to sell tea sometimes, Nana. We can't just talk about it in Cornwall.
Oh, I see. Very good. All right, so you're out in London. What do you think, then? Should we nationalise the water companies, Jonathan?
Well, obviously it matters a lot to a nation of tea drinkers where their water comes from. And I think what your panel has said is pretty true, actually. I think the water companies have been pretty shocking. And living in Cornwall, we see it firsthand. They're always blaming the farmers for making pollution in rivers, when we think probably a lot of it is just their own shoddy maintenance and profiteering. And I think we should get together with the water companies over a cup of tea, of course, which is nearly all water, and get some sense out of them, because I think it's not a case of privatising. No, I mean, where do you stop with your argument? Do you privatise all the bottled water companies? Of course not. I think there's a lot more innovation and good things that come out of private companies than come out of nationalised companies. But I take your point. They've got to get better at what they do. I think we're not hearing about a lot of water shortages this year, which is a good thing, with the drought and everything. So they do get some things right, but I think the bosses have got a bit too big and greedy. And talk to the average tea drinker. They just want reliable, good quality water, not too expensive, and they're fed up of all these pollution stories. And I think the water industry just needs a really good shake-up, but not renationalising.
Shaken but not stirred. There he is with his cup of tea. Jonathan Jones from Tregotham Tea. Thank you so much for joining us. He always has a cup of tea. Right, so for the Great British Debate this hour, I've been asking whether we should nationalise our water companies. Let's see what you've been saying. Kathy says yes to bringing the water services back into the public ownership. It's a critical service and shouldn't be left to the whims of the private sector. Not doing a great job, are they? Michael says it's disgusting the way water companies are pumping the raw sewage into our streams and rivers. Criminal, in my estimation, to blight the environment as they are. Absolutely disgusting. Jacqueline says the contamination and wastage is totally unacceptable. Water is more important than gas or electric. Let's get water renationalised. But Barbara also added, nationalising the water companies is complicated. It's not just about money. In Scotland, I always paid a water charge in my council tax before and after privatisation. Not all costs were covered. Some expensive work by the water companies had to be paid for privately by homeowners. The changeover would cost a lot. I hear you, but I'm with you. I think they should never, ever be owned by private companies because it's too vital. Right, moving on to another story that caught my eye today. It's the story behind the BBC's explosive 2019 interview with, yes, you guessed it, Prince Andrew. It's going to be turned into a full feature film. The Newsnight interview in which the Prince talked about his friendship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein made headlines around the world. And the movie, called Scoop, will dramatise how much the show secured the interviews as well as the filming of it. So I'm joined now by Toby Young and also Danny Kelly. Toby, what do you think of that? They're going to make a film about that interview.
It's not exactly, all the president's men, is it? I mean, it doesn't... I guess it'll be a comedy, won't it? I imagine, Who would you think could play Prince Andrew?
Oof.
I think they were talking about, not Hugh Grant, the other one. Who's the other one?
Who's the other one? Male actor.
Colin Firth.
So maybe someone like that. Who's playing?
Surely it would be Steve Coogan. Would be
Steve
Coogan.
Yeah,
he's played Jimmy Savile, hasn't he?
Oh, God.
I mean,
Let's not go down there.
I feel, dare I say it, but Prince Andrew has taken such a battering.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was the worst car crash interview possibly in the history of television, and he's now been hounded from public life. I don't think he can leave his house without being booed or called pedo. I mean, you kind of think, well, he's kind of suffered enough.
We'll obviously take that
We
back.
really want to lay it on with a trowel.
He was obviously not convicted of anything, so we can't really use that terminology. So we do apologise.
I'm not saying
he's
right.
denied all allegations to that. Danny?
I think it's going to be more of a behind-the-scenes movie or it's a movie, isn't it? So it's going to be about all the negotiation, and it's about how a man who as I understand, is one of the more arrogant members of the royal family. I think it's going to get into the psyche of how a man can let his guard down to such an extent, maybe because of his false confidence and arrogance.
Well,
and
even Jenny Bond called him arrogant. Even Jenny Bond.
So I'm guessing that it's going to be behind the scenes.
Well, yeah, behind the scenes. Right, now it's time for our quick-fire debates, the part of the show where we discuss some other stories making the headlines. Still with me is broadcaster Danny Kelly and also General Secretary of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young. Right, so let's do these briefly. A global study on alcohol has found that a regular tipple could help you live longer. Now, the study found that some adults aged 40 and over drinking a small amount of alcohol could have health benefits, including lower risk of heart disease, stroke and diabetes. But it's not such good news for the young, with researchers warning that under 40s should go teetotal. So, basically, have you noticed any benefits from drinking, Danny?
Apart from headaches and weight gain. None at all. But I am an habitual drinker in the sense that when I drive home tonight, and it'll take me an hour and a half to the Midlands, I'm going to have a can of cider and I'm going to have a couple of glasses of wine.
Beside you on the seat, as you're driving?
No, totally no.
Cider, that's tramp's drink.
No, it's only because of the weather. Tramp's drink.
It's a tramp's drink.
Tramp juice. But habitual in the sense that I will have a drink every day, more than the government's
Really?
advice.
I don't drink much, Toby.
Yeah, well, when I saw this story, I thought fantastic. But then when I read past the headline and realised that it was only the recommended amount was 1 glass of red wine a day, I thought, oof, that might be difficult.
All right, well, let's move on, because lastly, if you can remember back in May, a man who left his girlfriend for a Ukrainian refugee made the front page of The Sun. Since the ordeal, Anthony Garnett has been ordered not to contact the mum of their 2 daughters after she took him to court for abusive text messages. Well, there's even more to this story, because he has since written a rap about the whole ordeal, saying, "It's my message direct to the people. People can come and take the full story that's direct from the soul." We've got a snippet for you now. Have a listen.
My IQ's 150 plus, I don't care for opinions or messages of disgust. I live life to the fullest, I live with no regrets. I'm now with a blonde, but yes, my ex was a brunette. The ex is two-faced, only way I can describe what she said to the papers. Yeah, it was all lies. People sliding my DMs, they want to know why I left my ex and kids.
Let's see what panel make of that, Toby. He made a rap out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he must be very unhappy. You know, hell hath no fury like a rapper scorned.
And it's another white lad trying to sound like a Jamaican.
He's not. I don't know what he was trying to sound like there.
He sounded like he was Jamaican. What were we talking about? Jamaican?
Jafacan.
No,
that's it.
Do you think that's what he was doing?
Well, I don't know. I think it's awful. I think it's awful that he's ran away from his missus, his 2 kids, and he's now making it national news again.
Well, listen, on today's show, we've been asking if Kemi Badenoch should step down. According to our Twitter poll, 18% of you say yes, 82% of you say no, she shouldn't. Well, listen, I've got to say thank you so much to my panel. Broadcaster Danny Kelly. Danny, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nana. Looking fabulous as always.
Oh, thank you very much. What do you want? And also General Secretary to the Free Speech Union, Toby Young.
Thank you.
Than't you very much for joining us. That's Toby. It's the first time he's been on the show. And a big thank you to you for your company and for joining me this afternoon. I'm back tomorrow at 4 to discuss the top stories with Reverend Calvin Robinson and comedian Leo Kearse. Be there or be square. I'll see you tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin. A rare Met Office red warning has now been issued for the extreme heat likely on Monday and Tuesday. These temperatures are potentially unprecedented and likely to cause health issue and impacts on infrastructure. High pressure is moving in. Actually, it's gonna bring most of us just a fine summer's weekend, but temperatures will be ticking up, more particularly early next week. Temperatures actually drop quite nicely overnight tonight, a reasonable night for sleeping. A few showers across northeastern England, they're fading away. We'll see a bit of drizzly rain in the far northwest by morning, but for most it's a dry night and a